What's up, everybody? Welcome to the KF Podcast. This is a very special episode. We're very excited to welcome to the show author of the new military sci-fi series, The Achilles Battle Fleet, Mr. Brendan Wilson. How are you doing today, Brendan?
I'm doing fine, sir. How are you?
Good, good. Um,
We kind of
so,
wrote a little note in there that you had too many accolades for us to put into the intro. I was trying to make a smoother intro, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot in here, so I guess we'll just cut to the chase and call him the author of the book.
Fair
So
enough.
that works good. Yeah, like Ken said, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time for meeting with us.
Well, thank you. It's my honor to be included in the show. I think it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, well, trust us. The honor is all us. We appreciate
absolutely.
what we appreciate when people want to give us the time of day. We met through mutual friend Natasha.
Yeah.
Coppola. I can't. She has too many names now to remember because now
Yeah.
she's married now and
She's
has
married.
a.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's married
now-
to Tommy Beardmore, who
Okay.
was the producer for the audio version of the Achilles Battle Fleet, and he and I actually made some films together, back in the day. A wonderful guy, and I watched her interview with you.
Yeah.
To get she sent it to me, so yeah, it's a great.
Yeah,
program.
she
You
was
still
lots
wanted to
of
do
fun.
this?
And her friend Tim, who directed her show she was in, we had a couple good talks with him too.
Mhm.
It was really good. So Tommy, you mentioned he starred in you had two short films, Doug's Christmas and A Child Lies Here, right?
Yeah, that's right. And he played the priest in The Child Lies Here, just sort of a ghost story, mystery story. And then he was the producer and I think the director also for Greetings from Prison.
Okay.
And I served as the executive producer for that. I didn't do any of the writing for that, so I can't take any credit for the creative portion of that. That was all him. And that's a wonderful. If you ever want to watch something that's just plain funny in short increments, those 10 episodes are really good.
And that one was called what again?
Greetings from Prison.
Greetings from Prison. Okay, yeah, I did see that with him. So you've known Tommy for a while then, huh?
I have, yeah. Wonderful guy. Wonderful.
We have not had the pleasure of meeting him yet. I just know that I bought one of his inventions on Amazon. He created that bottle with the pills, and
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, he created like a bottle for I take a lot of pills, so it was like a pill container with a bottle of water attached to it. It was really cool, and he was selling those on Amazon. Yeah. So we knew them through that. We interviewed Natasha before she had met him, right, guys? That was beginning of last year, and then they kind of had their whirlwind romance, and next thing you know, they're married.
Yeah.
So yeah, good for them. So let's talk a little. I felt you had we talked a little bit before the show. You were saying how your accolades aren't really, they're not what they seem to be, but they are pretty serious. I mean, you were in the military for 25 years as a Army Ranger and paratrooper.
Yeah. Yes.
What was that like? I mean, where were you stationed? Things like that.
Okay, so I went to college in Virginia, James Madison University. I originally wanted to be a lawyer. And one of my very good friends talked me into joining Army ROTC under the theory that the Army would pay for my law school. But in fact, what they did was they paid for me to go to Ranger School instead. But realistically, I was actually an artillery officer. I really enjoyed the physical leadership aspects of the military. And I just went to all the schools that I could get to. I went to jump school, Ranger School, Air Assault School. I served in the 101st Airborne Division for my first 3 years while I was lieutenant. Then I went to Korea. I commanded a fire base there. I eventually came back to the United States, and I served as a battalion operations officer for an 18th Airborne Corps artillery unit. And just like all other Army officers, I did a bunch of other stuff because they always got something for you to do that's not necessarily. I was a public affairs officer for about 7 years. 3 of those years I spent at NATO headquarters at the end of the 1990s during the NATO peacekeeping mission in Bosnia. And at that time, my boss was General Wesley Clark, who was the NATO commander. He was kind enough to write the foreword for the book. A wonderful guy. And if we have time, I'll give you a little anecdote about his leadership, and you can see how I sort of drew on some of my experiences with him for the for the main character of Admiral Chambers
Sure.
in the book. I retired in 2004, and I was actually working at NATO headquarters at the time. And I retired and went over to the civilian side. NATO has divided into two sort of categories. One is the international military staff that works on the military side. And then you've got a defense side, which is sort of like the Ministry of Defense, sort of like the Department of Defense. It's civilian. It's almost all, at least in my area, it's almost all former military officers. And we do defense planning for NATO. And that's in that capacity. I'd spent most of my time in Iraq, or a lot of the time in Iraq. I was an advisor to the Iraqi Armed Forces. Yeah, that's kind of my military thing. About 3 years ago, I had to retire. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I came back to the United States for treatment from the VA. And when it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to work anymore, I decided to do two things. One was to finish this book, which I've been writing for about 7 years. To get it edited and get it published, get the audio version done. And the other one was I wanted to finish law school, which I had actually started about 17 years prior, and I wasn't able to finish it just because of 9/11 and all the things that we were involved in after that. So I did pick that up. In the last 3 years, I'm almost finished with my law school now. This book has been published. I still have to write two other supposed to be a trilogy. So
yeah.
But if any of you have ever gone through law school, it's all consuming. It's much harder than I thought it was going to be. And I haven't really been able to write those other two. But in May, when I graduate, I will go full time to writing again.
Yeah, there's none of us here I think could handle law school. Or that's crazy. So you had ideas for this book while you were in the military, like while you were serving?
I did. So in about 2011, I started to write this. I didn't really have an idea for necessarily a novel, but I had an idea for a scenario. And it just started to take form. I started to write it, and at some point the characters took off. They changed over time. They sort of told me what to write. It's hard to explain. And it was clear that it was going to become a novel. I was actually very busy at the time. If you ever meet anybody that works at NATO headquarters, the day for me started at 6 o'clock in the morning. It went till whenever it went till. We traveled a lot. And there just wasn't any time where you could just sort of sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to write. So I wrote whenever I could. If I was on a train, on a plane, in a bunker in Baghdad, that's where I wrote. And
That's crazy. I mean, I know he said it before, but seriously, that career is so impressive, and thank you so much for all you've given to the country for that. That's really
that's very kind of you. But I will make the caveat here, because there's going to be people that I actually met a young man about 5 or 6 years ago who had 7 tours in combat.
Oh wow!
And the last time I was in Baghdad for a very short period of time, just in and out, he was actually on his 8th tour. So there's a lot of people, in most of them a generation younger than me, but not all, who have just spent really a good portion of their adult life in very, very difficult circumstances. And my circumstances were much easier than that. Most of the time that I was in Iraq, I had a close protection team. I was in one of the embassies. I had people whose job it was to save my life. And I was not doing some of the hard things that other people have done. And I don't want to present myself as if I had done that.
Yeah, my brother-in-law has actually served a couple tours in Iraq. He's in the Army. I think actually 3 out of his 4 kids, I think he was away when they were actually born. So we've done we've heard a lot of stories and talked a lot about it. So to me, anybody who's been over there dealing with whatever you're doing, it's it's such a sacrifice, at any level compared to us sitting here at our computer talking about comic books and and Marvel movies.
Every job is important. It's one of the things that comes out in the novel. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. So one thing I thought was exciting, interesting in here is the martial arts aspect of it. Justin and I both, I took karate for 4 or 5 years when I was in high school. Justin himself, you did judo for a while?
Yeah, judo, mostly in college and a little bit after college. but I actually studied under. I know with your extensive background, and especially in Taekwondo, are you familiar with Grandmaster Kyu Ha Kim?
I'm not. So I
Okay,
don't recognize.
he recently passed away, but he was a judo coach for the U.S. Olympic team in the
Oh my
80s,
goodness.
and he did some military advisement when he first came to this country from Korea. But yeah, I was very honored to be able to learn under him
Great.
for the time that I had. So
Great. Well, you'll
What
probably like it because I actually work judo into the one of the training sessions. Although I've never practiced judo, I did work one of the techniques in there. So I'll leave that to you.
nice.
So,
so talk a little bit about your martial arts training.
well, when I was 16 years old, I got cut from the varsity baseball team at in Fort Hunt High School in Alexandria, Virginia, and that instant I drove down to the local karate studio. Actually, it's Taekwondo studio. It's called Robert's Karate, and I started training in Taekwondo. I kept it up through high school and college. I went into the military, and there was there's always somebody that wants to train in the military. I coached and was a team captain for a couple of military teams, one from the 101st Airborne Division, one from 18th Airborne Corps. I did some competition along the way. When I was in Belgium, part of my travel duty is as a public affairs officer. I would go with the advance party whenever the NATO commander would travel from country to country, and he gets a lot of travel responsibility. And of course, his close protection people, his bodyguards, always go on the advance party. They actually lead the advance party because nobody can do anything unless they clear it. The NATO commander is also the U.S. commander for Europe, which means he has a very important role in the defense for the United States, which means he has to be protected at all times in communications. So anyway, his close protection guys, I got to know them, and they had told me that they were going to Germany from Belgium to get training in weapons disarming techniques. And I said, I will do that here for you for free because I have a little class that I'm running. So I did. I had them in for a seminar, and we practiced. What their issue was, they didn't. Unlike the United States, where a federal officer can draw his firearm to protect, an official if he needs to, that's much more difficult in Europe. That's how they explained it to me. If they have to shoot somebody in Europe, it's going to be a problem. And what they wanted to be able to do was to make sure that if a firearm or another weapon was present, that they could, if their opportunity presented itself, disarm the person without drawing their weapons and shooting. So I had trained them in that. Although some of them were already pretty accomplished. I had one of them, I was doing a drill, and I had my students who I was already trained with them. And I saw one of my students, on his back, in a submission hold. And it turned out the guy he was trying to train had been a Detroit police officer before he joined the Army. He absolutely knew how to take care of people like that. But that's a lot of fun. And when I about 10 or 12 years ago, with my ex-wife, we had started our own martial art called Aristos, which is based on the Korean hardstyle stand-up type of techniques, but it was based on a philosophy drawn from classical Greece. And part of the impetus for that was I thought that some of the approaches that we were getting were too authoritarian. The Grandmaster was the lord of it all, and you were a nothing. And I really felt like there needed to be a more open exchange. And so we, instead of adopting the Confucian idea of courtesy, which is basically one of subservience and respect, we used the Greek idea of xenia, which is the guest-host relationship. So that the guest, if you come into somebody's house, right, the person that's the guest is treated sort of like a god, right? But the person that comes in the house also understands that they have responsibilities to the host, to protect them, and to it's a mutual exchange of responsibilities. So we kind of approached it from that perspective, and that was quite successful. We trained people in Belgium in 2 different schools. Most of them were people who were flowing through either military or military families, and they would go back out to their country after a few years. I did some competition in 2009. I won the silver medal at the U.S. Open.
Wow.
For martial arts forms, and I still do it today. It's actually good for me. In fact, my wife, We were just recently married, but she had trained in karate for about 5 years. And then when we met here a couple years ago, I started to train her in my version of Taekwondo. She's just taken her black belt test and passed it. And she did really, really good. If you want, I'll send you the photographs from the pictures. It's got her breaking boards, head height, doing all. And she's my age too, so she's pretty tough for somebody in her 60s.
Now, do you go? Is there a school that you run now for that, or do you just train on your own?
I just train on my own. I have I have my basement set up as a dojang, or the Japanese would call it dojo. And then there's a wonderful little park right near me. It's one of the reasons I love Sycamore, Illinois. It's just this beautiful little, Indian Mayberry town. But there's a beautiful park, and I walk there every morning. I do my martial arts forms there, and I occasionally have other students. I had a student that was my daughter is a physician, and one of her physician friends. But when they went off to the residency, you never see them because they never come out. It's an 80-hour week. But so I haven't seen much. So mostly it's just me and my wife now. Yeah.
The reason I asked is, when I did karate when I was younger, I did it under the Japan Karate Federation.
Yeah. So Shotokan.
Which was Master Demmer at the time. Master Demmer was the guy that actually trained Pat Morita for all the Karate Kid movies.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Back in in the 80s. Yeah. And it was so, I learned a lot from it. It was really good. It was really disciplined, but you had to really know what you were doing in order to advance your next level in a belt system.
Sure.
And what I saw these days with modern karate, like I tried to get my kids into it, and these Taekwondo places around Pittsburgh, it's all just money. It seemed to me like if you pay your $35, they'll give you your yellow belt. You pay your next $35, they'll give you a stripe on it. They'll give you an orange, whatever their ranking is. And they really didn't care about the development of the kid. And I didn't like it. I pulled my kids out of it. I'm like, this is just a money grab. Like, they're not really learning. I learned so much in just the 5 years I took it, stuff I still remember today, and just, the aspect of it where it seems to me like it's hard to find someone that really cares about the skill and the talent of it and the tradition of it, as opposed to just, we want to make money. We're here to make. We don't care if you're good or not. You can be a black belt in 2 months if you pay enough dues.
If you pay enough, yeah. That's such a shame. But I will tell you, there are some great instructors out there. I think it's very difficult to make a living if that's your primary purchase. I've never charged ever. Even though I had 2 full schools, we just did it. Gratis. In fact, for most of my students, wouldn't have been able to afford even their uniforms, and we paid for that and their certification. But that's because it wasn't my primary source of income, so I could do that. But I have worked with other people. Had some wonderful instructors through the years. Not all of them have stayed in it because it is difficult. They just basically end up taking other careers.
Right.
Some of them have, and they're just amazing, wonderful people. My wife trained with Russell Burke, who has a Burke Karate Academy in Tallahassee, Florida. That's a wonderful school. If you should go there and watch it if you want to see how a traditional martial arts can work with a lot of students in a really healthy atmosphere. I was just so impressed when I went down there, and I watched one of his courses and talked to him a little bit.
That's awesome. Great. All right. Well, why don't we talk about the book a little bit?
Okay, great.
Let's get into the good part. So the book, The Achilles Battle Fleet. This is book 1, from what we understand, right? I want to say the name. It's the Mei-Ling Lee is the name of book 1.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So the plot line starts with, you've got sort of a ragtag group of starships. They are evacuating civilians from a contested area. There's a low level of combat. And the book starts with 2 people. There's Admiral J. Chambers, who is the Inspector General. He's an older admiral, sort of out of his prime, sort of passed over. The Inspector General isn't really an important post. And they're doing an inspection on a troop carrier after hours because there's some sort of command climate problem on that vessel. And while they're waiting for the captain to come to the bridge, they see that the command vessel is destroyed, and they're being ambushed and they're under attack. And everyone is just sort of flabbergasted because they know that 1,000 people probably have died. And the admiral's very cool, and he just says, Lieutenant Lee, you will take command of this bridge as a battle captain. I'm going to transfer the flag. I'm going to take command of because he knows all the other admirals are dead. And so she just kind of wakes up and she walks out and does what she's been trained to do. And she gets a report. She starts to move the forces around, and so that's the impetus for getting the novel going. What you see is Admiral Chambers, who is really a warrior at heart. He takes the survivors and he gets them together and he gets them moving. And his idea, his vision is, they've been told, they've got an announcement that came from the president, who is like the 30th in line because 30 people have been killed that were in line for the presidency. The president has said that their guidance is to defend civilian populations and prepare for offensive operations. So he says, that's great. I'm an independent command. And he says, this is going to be a battle fleet. We're going to train it and prepare it, and we're going to find the enemy because they don't know who the enemy is. And we're going to take the battle to the enemy. Then he gets everybody working for that. And if you let me tell me a little story about General Clark, you'll see where I got that motivation.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And then but the story then revolves around them developing that. There's a couple of themes, right? One is just the general, sci-fi, military sci-fi battle scenario. What I drew upon, at one point in my military career, I was assistant professor of military science at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I taught military history. So I've got an interest in military history, and I drew from some of the historical battles, like Alexander the Great at Guatemala, right?
Oh, okay.
And Nelson at the Nile. And so the battles are sort of revolving around that. Sometimes there's an actual reference to that, but most of the time it's left for the reader to see if they can find that, and if they can find that connection. So there's a military history theme on that. There is a special operations theme that I got from having trained with and served with the Rangers. And one of the things that comes out of that, which I think anybody who's been in the military will appreciate, and I hope that non-military readers will also appreciate that, is the dedication that the special operations people spend in their training. And they train over and over and over again. Fire maneuver, communications, repeat. Never satisfied. They just continue to do that. There's a martial arts theme that runs through that, which I think martial artists would appreciate and other observers. There's also a theme of what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated environment where they have to sort of find their way. And there is a scene in there where Mei-Ling Lee is approached by a bully in the gym, and she basically calls him out and says, "Okay, let's do this." That actually happened to my ex-wife. Something very like that. She was my ex-wife was also a martial artist. She's a 5th degree black belt, and she was approached by a very large man in her office who thought that it was funny that she was very petite. The character Mei-Ling Lee is actually based on her, as an Asian woman born in Hong Kong, and he came up behind her and poked her. And she turned around and put him in a submission hold and said, "Jeez. Can I help you?"
Wow.
Yes.
And he said, No, it's good. It's good. And then she twisted it a little bit, and she said, "Are you sure I can't help you?" He said, No, I'm fine. She said, "I don't like to be poked." Right?
Wow.
So
that's
so
a scary combination of words. Ex-wife and fifth degree black belt is a scary combination of words. Speaking from someone who has an ex-wife, that's pretty terrifying to me.
No, my ex-wife Sonia Mei-Ling is her middle name. Russell. She is a wonderful person. I have a very respectful relationship with her.
Great.
And there's no harshness. I'm not afraid that she'll track me down or anything.
Put you in a submission hold.
That's right. But so I think that's one of the themes. But the most important theme to me, well, let me back up a little bit. There's also a science theme, right? So the enemy that is attacked has a technology which they don't understand, and they have to try to figure it out, drawing upon the resources that they have. And I did some sort of experimental thought process with quantum field theory. And I said, if you could take quantum field theory and do this with microscopic objects, you could also do it with macroscopic objects. So that's the theory behind that. It turns out that one of the maintenance NCOs, the chief petty officer, is actually a famous scientist who has been hiding from government assassins for 20 years. And he steps up and says, no reason to hide anymore, right? I think this is what this is. And he tries to come up with ways that the military can then counter that. But to me, the most important thing is watching people under stress, having to make decisions. And I think everybody can relate to this. You have to make a decision of which there is no perfect solution. So every decision has a risk. Every decision has consequences. Some decisions have guaranteed negative consequences. And that's true in the military. You got a course of action, somebody's going to get hurt. And yet, are you going to do it? You have to make that decision. And I think what happens to the person when they've made those decisions, what happens to their own character and their own self-image is kind of what, to me, was the most important part of the book. You know, what does Mei-Ling think about herself after she's had to do some very hard things? And I think a lot of people can do that. You don't have to be in the military or, you know, the police force to do that. We all do that. We've all done that during the pandemic. We've had to make decisions about our jobs, about our families, about our safety. And those decisions have consequences. They're not free.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I can say that the intro to the book is intense. I'm not super far into it, but I have gotten started. And that opening sequence when the ship gets destroyed, and you know, the kind of, you get the sense of panic that everyone is feeling, and then, like you said, when Mei-Ling Lee wakes up and just steps into her role, it was I've enjoyed the intro quite a bit, so I'm looking forward to moving further in the book.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, that was my intent, was to sort of grasp the reader and put the reader in the position of somebody who has to do something like that, just step up and take command.
Cool. Now, is this series take place in the distant future, or is there a time frame?
One of the things which is not, the date is given, because the date on the initial communique from the president is given. It's actually the 600th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And then you get a little bit of the history when they start recruiting people for the intelligence section. You get some of the history that's engaged. But what had happened was that the Americans' war on terrorism in the 21st century had weakened the international order. And that when the international order then was hit with the pandemics of the 21st century, it collapsed, which was followed by nuclear war and a century of chaos before the alliance was reestablished. So to be fair, I wrote that in 2011 before that was a pandemic.
Oh, wow.
I was going to say, that's a little topical right now.
Yeah,
it is.
James.
I wish
Predicting the future in these books.
But to be fair, there was plenty of warning that pandemics were possible. The government had a plan. One of my jobs when I was served in Atlanta, I was on Response Task Force East, which is the Defense Department's response to, it's used for weapons of mass destruction. So if there is ever a chemical or a nuclear attack on U.S. soil, the Defense Department has a team that goes out and coordinates that initial response. But we also prepared to respond for a pandemic. So we knew about, for a long time, the government has known that some sort of flu-like pandemic was certainly a potential. So when I wrote that into the book, I didn't think I was really using, any prophecy.
Yeah. Wow. Ken and Brock, you guys have any questions about the story?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me just grab something here. Yeah, Brock, do you have anything? Sorry, I'm having a hard time connecting here.
You can go, Brock.
How many books do you have planned for the series?
So this was designed to be a trilogy.
Okay.
As you read through the book, I have spent some time developing the different characters in the book. My editor, David Himmel, had actually one time said, "I don't see why you're spending so much time on this because it doesn't further the plot." And I said, I wanted the characters to be developed because I want them to have potential for follow-on books.
Right.
So at the end of the climax, in the epilogue, they talk about what all the different characters are doing now. It's 6 months later.
Mm.
And I've left that open so that you could have these 3 books, and then if there's the interest and the aptitude, some of the other characters could have books of their own.
That's awesome.
I mean, that's great to see somebody that actually cares about character development, because it feels like nowadays with everything you watch, they introduce a character in 2 minutes and then the character's gone, and you're like, wow, they didn't. Why do I care about this character? There was nothing. Or I mean, we review a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows, and that's one thing we always harp on is like, why do I care about that character and that show I just watched? Like there was no setup for this person. They're trying to make it seem like you're really upset that they died. So
yep,
I
weird. Completely agree with you. I even told my wife the other day we were watching the movie. And I said, I hope that character dies. I'm sick of this. I don't care about them.
These are all things we've said multiple times in shows.
Oh yeah, multiple times. So
are you free on Thursdays?
An editor telling you like why you wasting time on character development sums up the entertainment industry nowadays.
I did not mean to make that critical of David Himmel, who is a wonderful guy and he's actually the publisher of the book. So.
But that's cool. It's good to see, new stuff coming out that people actually want you to care about a character and understand why they're doing what they're doing,
I think that's what people want to see. I think people are interested. They'll read the book if they can realize that there's something going on with that character.
Yeah.
If I could just give a shot, what General Clark had written, and I pulled it out and put it on the back of the book. He said, readers will take from Brendan's novel an understanding that individuals make a difference, that character counts, and with courage and competence, history is made. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a beautiful thing to say. And I really appreciated them saying that, because that's really what I want people to take away from the book.
Wow.
Excellent.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I know probably a lot of this is inspired by your actual military history and things you've come across, but did you take any inspiration from any other films or books or anything that you're like, wow, I really like that aspect, something I saw in Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever,
Well, I think, I don't know if it's inspiration, but as you read the book, they've already got faster than light travel. We don't call it warp drive, but that's there. That's something that every reader understands because of Star Trek and Star Wars and so forth.
Yeah, light speed stuff.
Yeah, the movie and the television show Battlestar Galactica starts in very similar type of ways, so that people would be familiar with that. I really liked Heinlein's Starship Trooper, the book. I didn't really engage with the movie as well. He wrote
the movie's kind of silly.
He wrote a book back in the 50s called Space Cadet, which actually takes somebody training for a military academy to be a spaceman or whatever, part of the space military. And so some of those things I think certainly had an influence on me.
I mean, Starship Troopers was a silly movie, but I did like the way they portrayed the military in the future, how like people served and went and the different experiences they had and the way rank was set up. Obviously, it got a little out of control with the goofy bug aliens and all that stuff, but I always thought the military aspect of that was a cool movie.
Yeah, well, the book is really good. The book is really worth reading, and it's not silly at all. You won't agree with everything Heinlein wrote in there, but it does also follow that. And he was in the military, in the Navy during World War II, so he brought some of his experience to that, I think.
Okay. So you're working with is the audio book out right now, or that's still being worked on?
It's with the company that does that for Audible, and I'm not sure what that is. So it should be out within days for sure.
Oh, okay.
That was really a good experience for me. Tommy Beardmore and David Himmel had recruited Harmony Zhang to be the voice actress for that. And we had actually put out a thing. We had about a dozen people come back and say, give us little auditions for that. And they were all really good, but Harmony is really something. You're going to love this audio version that she does. She just nails it. First of all, she does the narration part perfect. She does, she is of Chinese descent. She's a Mandarin speaker. so she knows exactly how to do the accents and so forth. She is probably about the age of Mei-Ling Lee, somewhere in her mid to late 20s, but she just does a great job. And to give you an example, the book isn't, I didn't write the book with this idea that anyone would ever have to do a voice, it just wasn't in my mind.
Yeah.
But some of it's very complicated. There's a court martial at the end that has 11 speakers, right?
Wow.
And some of them are, from East Africa, and some of them are from China, and some of them are older males, and some of them, she just nails that. It's done beautifully. And the only reason that we were able to afford her was because she had just graduated from DePaul's drama in MFA. So she just kind of starting out, as I told those guys, 2 years from now, we're never going to be able to afford her. And if you want to have her on, I'll bet you she would be able to. I mean, she's done other things as well.
Yeah.
I think this is really
Cool.
a place for her talents.
Wow.
And I really enjoyed that whole process. One of the fun things I had was, because I'm military, I'm using a lot of military terms. Now, I try to explain them in the book, but if you're not military, you don't know how they're pronounced because they're not words in the English language. Right? So she would just do her best, and I would have to say, okay, well, there's a different way of saying that, But the other thing that was really good about it was that there were some inconsistencies in the text, right? So the book hadn't been published yet, and she was able to. And when you read it, you find those inconsistencies that you wouldn't get just from reviewing it. So that was a huge benefit to us to have her go through that and say, hey, this isn't working right. We changed the names of the characters, but those names don't work anymore. So
yeah, well, that's really cool. Yeah, I can't wait for the audiobook. I'd love to check it out.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big audiobook guy. These guys make fun of me a little bit because I read a lot of books, but most of it is done through Audible.
I do the same.
I'm definitely looking forward to the audio version of this.
Yeah, I really do think people are going to like that audio version. Yeah.
Cool. So the book right now, I know you can get Achilles Battle Fleet on Amazon.
Yeah.
You can get it on their what's the thing you use there, Justin? The Kindle. You can download it on Kindle. I think it's you can get it on paperback as well.
Yeah.
Can you get it in local bookstores too as well, like Barnes and Noble and that as well?
Yeah, we have an expanded contract. So, but I don't know. I know that I saw Target was advertising it. I don't know whether it's in those other stores. It's early days.
Yeah, it just came out.
You can get it. Yeah. Oh, anyway, so I did want to tell you that one little story about General Clark. If you got it.
Oh yeah.
So you remember that in the late 1990s, I think it was the mid 1990s, there was that horrible massacre in Srebrenica, where the Muslims, 7,000 men and boys were executed, and then their families were kicked out of Srebrenica. And so General Clark did two things. First of all, he helped negotiate the Dayton Peace Accords, which puts the country back together and stopped the Civil War. And then he was responsible for the NATO forces, which went in and enforced the peace treaty. So that had been going on for a couple of years. And in 1998, he decided to visit Srebrenica. So I went with him with a very small team of security, communications, diplomats, and so forth, enough to get on a van, basically. And we went in there, and he was walking around. And as we pulled up, a load of journalists came up, but the journalists were being led by a public affairs officer from the OSCE, and all the journalists were from Muslim countries. And no Muslims had been back in Srebrenica since the massacre, and it was bringing up some tension. So we did a little press conference on the street, and they had like 4 cameras and about 20 journalists. And the security guys, who I've told you I worked with, came up to me and they said, well, the translator has told us that the men have told these boys to pick up rocks and throw them at the general. And I said, well, what will you do? And he said, we'll just get between him and the rocks and we'll move him out of here. But we're not going to stop the press conference. So as he's giving the press conference and we're waiting to see whether rocks will be thrown at him, an older man who I think was intoxicated got up behind him and started yelling at him in Serbian. And so the cameras are on, there's nothing to be done about it. And so he turns around and he says, come on down here and talk to me. And the translator tells him that. And the guy shakes his head, and General Clark says, tell him if he doesn't come down here, I won't talk to him. So the guy comes down, and then General Clark does this. He puts his hands out like this, and he says, what can I do for you? Right? And the guy immediately takes that as a friendly gesture, and he gets on his knees and he grabs his hands. He starts to cry. And he says, "We're worried that you're going to make us leave our homes." And General Clark said, "Did you vote in the last election?" And the guy said, "No." And he said, "This is your country. You need to vote in the elections if you want to stay in your homes." And the kids dropped their rocks, and we didn't get any trouble after that. That was a wonderful thing. It was on camera. And when he ran for president, I thought for sure he'd use that film, but he didn't. He's quite a modest person, by the way.
Wow.
But I think you'll see that element of leadership reflected in the character Admiral Chambers.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, just to wrap up a future things, I had a couple questions here. So this book, 3 books. Do you have anything, ideas you're looking for after Achilles Battle Fleet? Like other type of stories you would like to tell, or a different novel you want to get into, different direction, or do you feel more, you comfortable in the military stuff, or anything you thought about venturing out into? Because you've had a lot of other experiences.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really given it much thought. I do really want to get these 3 books done, and I do want to leave open the opportunity of writing books about the other characters. One of the things I want to do once I get my law degree and get qualified is to help refugees. Part of what I had seen overseas, some people in very difficult circumstances. I once tried to help one of the interpreters get out of Iraq. It just, and the things that have happened recently is very moving for me. The idea that somebody with a child who has no resources is desperate to try to do something and has no one to help them is something that I would like to try to do. So I'm going to spend some time doing that, and that's still a journey for me to get that done.
That's fantastic.
But beyond that, I don't really have any. I think it's going to be hard enough to write these next 2 books, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
Would you be interested if somebody wanted to do a movie about it and make you write a screenplay for it or something like that?
Well, I'd love to do that. The director of the 2 films that where I had done the background story, they were short stories turned into, was Calvin Steinken. This is about 2015 or so. He's absolutely wonderful. And so I wrote him, and I sent him a copy of the book, and I said, "Let's make this into a movie." He said, "I'm in." I said, "We just need $20 million."
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'd love to do that. The producer for A Child Lies Here was Doyle Devereaux. He's an Emmy-winning actor in his own right, and his father, Clark Devereaux, played Doug in Doug's Christmas. Doug's Christmas is about a Korean War veteran who is trying to adjust. Clark Devereaux is actually a Korean War veteran. The story was modified for him, and then during the story, he actually tells the story of losing one of his friends in combat, and he starts to cry, and everybody on the scene is crying, including the person on the camera and stuff like that. The person,
Wow.
It's just such a moving thing. And we showed that in different. I mean, we got standing ovations. People would stand up and cry at the end of that movie. It was, it was really something. I would love for him to play Admiral Chambers.
Yeah.
If you guys could get me in touch with somebody who has $20 million, we'll do it.
Yeah, we'll get on that. Just as long as when the movie's debuting, we get you first interview, and we get the and we get the actress too.
Yeah, that's good.
We want first rights,
You
and we want invited to the movie premiere, right, guys? We want to go out to Hollywood for
sure.
I promise.
a little red carpet premiere.
You guys get me the funding. You'll be my
All right, we'll try to get on that funding. That's great. So the last thing I want to do before we end is just a couple of questions, since we are a pop culture type podcast and we talk about that stuff all the time. Just curious, what's your favorite movie of all time? Like, one of your favorite films?
Oh my goodness! I wish I'd prepared for that.
Anything, comedy, favorite film, whatever stuff.
I'm trying to think. When I went through a phase, which I think we probably all went through, where the first 3 Star Wars movies, the first 3 that were produced. I mean, I just watched them over and over.
Yeah.
I loved those. I loved those movies.
Are you a fan of any of the newer Star Wars stuff that
Not really.
Disney's
It's
been putting out?
Yeah, harder for me to engage that. I don't know why.
It's not as good.
That's
it
why.
doesn't seem- yeah, the swashbuckling,
Yeah.
Luke Skywalker and stuff like that. So I'd have to say I don't really have a favorite, but I did like those three. Yeah.
Are you a fan of the current comic book movie culture? Any of the Marvel movies? Any of those? Do you like any of them?
I haven't really engaged them. I've watched
Really?
a couple of them. I don't quite get it. And I'm sure that's me. That's not a reflection of the movie itself. I'm sure there's people that enjoy that.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They have $20 million, don't they?
Yeah, they do. If we get a hold of Disney, we make this the next adventure that they want to go off on.
There we go. Yeah.
How about favorite sports teams?
I'm not really a sports fan. When I was there was a time when I was a child when I lived in New York, and I lived in New York when the Mets won the World Series, right?
Okay.
The Knicks won the championship. The Jets won the championship in that 69-70 era. And at that point in my life, everything was downhill after that.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys are a little bit younger than me, but Tom Seaver was the pitcher for the Mets. He is actually a friend of my father's and came over to the house and signed a
Oh,
ball
wow.
for me.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a great time. We got to see one of the World Series games.
Yeah, the Jets haven't been good since.
Yeah. But that was, and after that, it's been kind of downhill. I don't really follow sports as much. So
Well, I got the impression you were in the Chicago area.
I am. I'm in the little town Sycamore.
And I'm a big Chicago sports fan, so I was hoping maybe you were a fellow Chicago sports fan too. I don't meet many Chicago sports fans in Pittsburgh.
You have shamed me. Everyone in Chicago, they'll say, "Oh yeah, such and such a team is playing." I'll go, "I don't even know. I'm sorry, I can't even see a player."
Well, you're not missing much in Chicago right now, other than a bunch of losing. So
I'm sorry,
it's probably a good time for that to not be a fan there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, anything else, guys? Any other questions, guys?
Anything else you'd like to plug or anything? Or
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, I'd like to. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity, and I really enjoyed talking to you guys. You're obviously a great bunch of people, and I appreciate the feedback and the encouragement that you've given me. And I really do hope you enjoyed the book. I think you will, especially, you'll be able to apply different parts of it. To things that you've done in your karate and judo, and just the general facing of crisis and having to do that.
Cool. And are you on? Is there anywhere do you want to plug? Are you on Instagram, Twitter, any of those things like that? Do you have a website? Anything we can plug?
If you go to brendanwilsonwrites.com, that's a website that Natasha has set up for me. I'm completely ignorant. I think I do have an Instagram account, but I don't know how to use it. But
she knows how to use Instagram,
she
so
knows how to do
she'll
everything.
share this podcast with everybody. She's good at that stuff.
Yeah.
She will. Yeah, she's very aggressive. I mean, she's contacting 20 people a day, and
yeah, she's awesome. She's a hilarious person to talk to. We really enjoyed talking with her. She's fun.
Yeah, she really is wonderful. But I think Brendan Wilson Writes is the place to go.
Awesome
for that. Yeah, and that probably does lead you to the Instagram page or something.
Great. And like I said, it's available on Amazon. It's available online. I did check here and look. It is on Target.com.
Plugging it.
There's a picture of it.
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome.
You can find it at all those retail places. And then the audiobook will be out probably on Audible and other places where you can find it. So, yeah, look for it. Achilles Battle Fleet. It was a pleasure talking to you, sir.
It was
Absolutely.
great talking to you.
Thank you.
We had a great time. And Ken, take us out.
All right, everyone, please like, share, subscribe, invite, tell your friends, check us out, and have a great evening.
All right.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks. All right.
Later.